Welcome to This Explainer. Every single September, it happens again. Millions of people eagerly wait for the newest iPhone. Some literally camp outside for hours, while others happily drop over $1,000 on a phone they already know practically everything about. But Apple isn't just a tech company anymore, is it? It's really a symbol of status, of innovation, and of incredibly intense brand loyalty. But behind all that sleek hardware and, let's be honest, absolutely flawless marketing lies a much more complicated story. It's a story of power, of control, and of billion-dollar lawsuits. Today, we're exploring the specific corporate decisions that have fiercely divided consumers, developers, and governments all around the world, because this is the dark side of Apple. So here's our roadmap for This Explainer. We're going to cover building the Apple empire, getting inside the walled garden, the right to repair, the battery performance controversy, a look behind the global supply chain, and then finally, looking at the whole picture. Let's dive right in. Section 1. Building the Apple Empire. We really have to start our journey back in a California garage in 1976. That's where Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne, who, by the way, famously sold his 10% stake in the company for just $800, first set up shop. And what began in that little garage eventually shifted human history. The 1984 Macintosh completely changed personal computing. Then the iPod transformed music, the iPhone redefined what a smartphone even was. Today, it's not just about one single device, it's a massive, globally connected ecosystem. And the reality is, this company now earns hundreds of billions of dollars every single year. But that kind of extraordinary success brings some pretty extraordinary influence over the entire tech landscape. And honestly, that immense scale is exactly where the controversies begin to take root. Which brings us to Section 2, Inside the Walled Garden. Buying your first Apple product actually feels wonderfully simple. Leaving it, however, well, that isn't quite as easy. The ecosystem kind of traps you, but gently. You buy an iPhone. Then, you add a Mac because they work so well together. Then an Apple Watch, which of course only pairs with your phone. Your AirPods connect instantly, and before you know it, you're communicating almost exclusively via iMessage, locked securely inside what the tech industry calls a walled garden. So on one side, Apple argues that keeping everything strictly in-house creates a highly secure, privacy-focused, and just completely seamless experience for the user. But on the flip side, critics argue this inherently limits competition and makes switching to alternatives almost impossible. And this exact debate extends right to the App Store, where strict rules are praised for security by supporters, but heavily slammed for stifling competition by developers. But this tight control doesn't just stop at software. It extends right to the physical hardware in your hand. What actually happens when your device breaks? We all know that heart-stopping, slow-motion feeling of dropping a phone face down on concrete. And we definitely dread taking it to the store, only to be told that replacing a single piece of glass is going to cost hundreds of dollars. And that leads us into Section 3, the right to repair. This very specific consumer frustration gave birth to the right to repair movement. The critics' argument here is pretty straightforward. Consumers should be entirely free to fix the devices they own, using whichever parts or independent shops they choose. Apple's counterargument? Well, they say requiring genuine parts and certified technicians is absolutely necessary to protect customer safety and device security. Now, while Apple has recently expanded some self-service repair options, this global debate is still raging on. Section 4. The battery performance controversy. This tight control over hardware leads us to a pretty massive revelation from back in 2017. Apple finally confirmed a long-held consumer suspicion: certain older iPhones were deliberately reducing their performance as their internal batteries aged. Now, Apple explained the software feature wasn't malicious at all. It was just designed to prevent unexpected device shutdowns and actually extend the usable life of that aging hardware. However, as you might guess, that explanation didn't exactly smooth things over. Customers felt totally betrayed by the lack of clear transparency before this performance throttling was secretly introduced. The backlash was swift, resulting in billion-dollar lawsuits worldwide and forcing Apple to offer heavily discounted battery replacements. Really, this event became the ultimate symbol of the growing debate over trust between tech giants and everyday consumers. Section 5. Behind the global supply chain. Zooming out from the battery in your hand, we have to look at how millions of these products are actually made. The back of the device says designed by Apple in California, but the reality is a massive, incredibly complex global manufacturing network. Now, Apple does highlight its rigorous supply chain audits and their annual responsibility reports.
Yet they still face intense, ongoing public scrutiny over labor conditions at these facilities. Balancing extreme manufacturing efficiency with worker welfare remains a hotly debated topic today.
Section 6. Looking at the whole picture.
As we wrap up this explainer, we really have to take a step back. Because at the end of the day, none of the scrutiny or the billion-dollar lawsuits changes one simple fact. Apple absolutely transformed technology. They changed how we communicate, how we work, how we create, literally how we navigate our daily lives. But being one of the world's most influential companies guarantees that every major decision they make will profoundly impact millions upon millions of people.
Which leaves us with a final question to ponder. Is Apple an innovative pioneer that constantly sets new standards for the entire tech industry? Or has its unprecedented success simply given it way too much control over our digital lives? The answer probably depends on which part of the story you choose to focus on. Because history rarely belongs to absolute heroes or absolute villains. It belongs to those willing to look at the whole picture. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.